Now I've just entered a stand of softwoods, a lot of pine and a little bit of spruce. And I've seen a lot of this today. This is a lightning strike tree. So sometime in the past this tree was hit by lightning. And yeah, I've seen 3 or 4 of those in here already today. Looks like it was a very tall tree, which probably explains the lightning strike. Lightning strikes tens, if not hundreds of thousands of times in the parks every year, but most of the time it doesn't spread into a forest fire, thankfully. Otherwise, I'd be walking in a stand of dead trees right now. And I'm not. It's a beautiful forest. I've come across a lovely little spread of Kananaskis. This is a perennial ground cover plant. See if I can find you some. It's got pretty little bell-shaped flowers that in a few months will turn into little red berries that taste terrible. Well, they actually don't taste terrible. They taste like nothing at all. The texture is what's terrible. It's like biting into a dry ball of dust, and there's this really hard seed inside. They are edible, even though they don't taste like they're edible. They're not particularly satisfying meal, but they are super high in vitamins A and C, and if you catch them after they have frozen in the wintertime, because the berries will often stay on all winter long, once they've had a frost or a whole winter, the berries are a little bit sweeter, like a lot of berries. Still not particularly tasty, but they could keep you alive in a pinch. Here's a fun little find. This is called a squirrel mitten, M-I-D-D-E-N. A squirrel mitten is a big, let's see, where are we looking here? Big pile of leftovers. Oof. So it's just layer upon layer of the pieces of the pine cone that the squirrel doesn't eat. The squirrel actually, here's a core of a pine cone that they have peeled. Here's another one. The squirrel actually doesn't eat much of the pine cone. They pull off the little leafy bits on the pine cone, and at the very tip, right here by my thumb, like an artichoke leaf, is where the nourishing piece is. So they'll nibble that off, and then they'll just discard the rest into these huge piles of scraps. And then if you find a squirrel mitten, you'll often see little burrows, little holes and stuff in the pile, and that is where they'll actually cache some food. So they'll make these little tunnels in their middens and bury their pine cones before they eat them, and then when they've eaten their bits, they toss the scraps into the pile. I like finding those because I think squirrels are cute. Now I have found a little patch of violets, and I think, but I'm not 100% sure, Lyndon will correct me if I'm wrong, I think that these are early blue violets. There he is right there, tiny little flower. The iPhone doesn't really do it justice, especially on video mode, but they are one of the first pretty little flowers I see blooming in the spring. Sometimes they'll bloom as early as March, but I've not seen them that early. The earliest I've ever seen is kind of middle of April. And the leaves are edible. They are nourishing. They are high in vitamins A and C. So I'm giving vitamins now. You can eat them in salads. like raw, or you can boil them up like you would other greens. And the flowers can be candied, which sounds delectable. I've not tried that because I'm not very handy in the kitchen, but apparently it can be done. Now I have found a couple little shooting stars, which are one of my most favorite spring flowers. As soon as I see my first shooting star of the year, I always get really excited because it's such a really pretty flower. There's not a whole lot of flowers prettier than this one. I think you'll agree when you see it. And one of the things that makes it so awesomely pretty is the fact that it doesn't look like much from a distance, so you have to kind of know what you're looking for to really appreciate it. It's a tiny little thing, and if you're looking at a huge meadow like this, that's just full of green and brown, unless you know what you're looking for and are trying to find it, you might not spot it. But this is a shooting star. And until you kind of get under it, you can't really appreciate that really pretty little yellow spot there. And it just kind of hangs like a bell. So you can't see the purple and the yellow together from a distance, and especially because it's like so tidy. But it's a really pretty flower. I love this one. So I think I have found wolf poo. Not 100% sure. And poo is hard because a lot of poo can be very variable and look like other species poo when it's not what you think it is. Anyways, I haven't seen any human tracks in this area for quite a while, and certainly nothing fresh. And so I don't think it's domestic dog. It's a little big for that anyways, but I could be wrong. So this is really fresh, like super fresh. I'm pulling it apart not to be gross, but it's kind of fun sometimes to see what's inside it and see if you can figure out what the animal's been eating. This one actually looks like it's mostly full of plant material. It's entirely possible that this is a deer or a sheep that isn't feeling particularly well. These pieces here, although it does smell really bad. So usually carnivore poo really stinks. So I think this is actually a carnivore of some kind, and it's pretty big. So wolf, could be a cougar, but doesn't quite look like cougar poo to me. But anyways, very cool. So from the poo, we go over here a ways. Where did I see that? We have some strawberries. Not the actual berries yet because it's not berry season, but these are strawberry plants. Ooh, my knee's sore today. This is a strawberry flower that's going to be a strawberry plant or a strawberry berry in another month or two. And strawberries have these really characteristic leaves. They come in like threes, and they've got the little teeth on the edges, so you know that's a strawberry. And they propagate with runners. I don't actually see any little red runners creeping along the ground, but sometimes you'll see these long red, like viney stems that creep along the ground and spread out more strawberry plants. But there's been a lot of strawberries along this trail, so mental note to come back here during berry season. Found a couple little chickweeds, cute little white flowers. The Latin name is Cerastium. I heard something. Cerastium arvense, I think is the species name. And they are in the carnation family, apparently. So there's a tiny little flower in the I have heard these called mouse-eared chickweeds as well. I don't know if that's actually the correct name, but the little tiny petals, I suppose you could think that they looked like cute little mouse ears. One of the first flowers I see blooming in the spring as well, like the shooting stars. Now this is a currant. I think it's going to be a black currant once it turns into flower and berry. Still kind of learning them before they get their flowers and berries. They're a little harder for me to identify. However, I recognize the really pretty leaves. I love the leaves on this plant. And I definitely recognize the thistles because last year, Fender, out of the way. Last year, I spent several hours in Kananaskis collecting black currants off of these little guys. This is a ribes species, R-I-B-E-S. Ow, 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 ow. And they're very prickly, but they do make, ouch, they do make really tasty jam. And I spent about 3 hours one day collecting black currants and got 3 cups of currants. It's a lot of work because they don't grow in big clusters. They grow like individually and you get prickled with the thorns every time you try and pick a berry. But I got enough to make 3 little tiny pots of jam and it was delicious. Great berries. But this hasn't come into flower yet, so I'm not 100% certain of the species, but I'm pretty sure it's black currant. I found some more poo. Poo is fascinating because it's kind of like footprints. It tells you who else has been using the trail when you're not likely to actually see these animals. It still kind of makes you feel close to them, and it's interesting to know who else has been here. So this I like this one because all that's left of it is deer hair. I don't know if you can see that in the picture. I'll try and get a Nikon photo of it to show it better, but this is clearly an older poo because the poo part is gone and it's just left the hair part, and probably a lot of parasites too. I used to collect these and send them off to the lab and get that lab to identify what parasites these things were carrying, and they're just loaded with tapeworms and roundworms and hookworms, and even I saw some whipworms once. So if you ever feel the urge to pull poo apart in the wild, use gloves or use a stick. Here's a fallen aspen, poplar, birch tree of some kind. I'm not too sure because I don't know my trees that well yet, but it's a hardwood, and there's a little area here where ungulates, so deer, moose, elk, if they're here, I'm not sure if they're in this area or not, have been chewing away at the bark to try and get the cambium, which is this kind of layer just under the bark. My fingernails aren't strong enough to peel it off. Not as strong as a deer's teeth. Anyways, the layer under the bark is very nourishing for them, and they probably did this when there was still snow on the ground, because sometimes they'll go for the grass. And actually, do I see maggots? I think I see maggots. So there's little, I don't know if you can see, little larvae. Actually, those are pupae because they're not moving. So something died or decayed there, and flies lay their eggs. And so if those hatch, if they're still viable, which I don't know, those will be maggots. Found a little bird's nest. I don't know what kind of bird made this nest, and it's too high up in the tree for me to see if there's anything in it, but it looks like an old nest, so I don't think there's anything in it. So I think it's okay to kind of pull the tree down a little bit. And look inside, so I'll have a look at that video and see if I got anything, but I doubt that there's anything in there. But birds' nests are still cool. Okay, a little bit about lichen. I don't know very much about lichen at all, but there's right here, oh, I just climbed up a long hill. Right here, there are two of my absolute favorite kinds of lichen. There is the freckled pelt, which I think is a really cool name and very appropriate for this species. So you can kind of see that it's got black spots on green, and the texture is a little bit rubbery, and it always kind of reminds me of frog skin. I like this one. And then just up the hill a little bit here, there's some wolf lichen, which I love because it's always kind of neon Nickelodeon green colored. So there's a good piece of wolf lichen, and that's a really common one. You'll see that a lot if you hike in Kananaskis at all.